In 1893 Germany, a 12-year-old boy loses his parents forever. They leave some money for him, but later during his travels, that money is also stolen. But even after losing everything, he had one thing left: his unstoppable passion for watches. Based on this passion, he created the world's greatest watch company. This is the story of Rolex watches. In Germany, only 12 years old, Hans Wilsdorf became an orphan after his parents' death, and his future looked very dark. In this situation, relatives sold his parents' business and sent him to a boarding school. During school, he befriended a boy from Switzerland who told him a lot about the Swiss watchmaking industry. After learning all this, Hans felt from within that his future belonged in this industry. Therefore, in 1900, at only 19 years of age, he left Germany and headed towards Switzerland. In Switzerland, he got a job at a watchmaking company called Kuno Korten. His job there was to check the accuracy of hundreds of pocket watches daily. While doing this work, a passion for making perfect watches developed within him. In 1903, he decided to go and settle in London. But a major incident happened during this journey. All 33,000 German gold marks inherited from his parents were stolen. This was a huge setback for him, but he had no other option but to keep moving forward. Upon reaching London, he took a sales and marketing job at another watchmaking company. Over the next 2 years, he learned a lot about manufacturing, sales, and most importantly, consumer behavior in the watchmaking industry. He realized that all watchmaking companies were focusing on making their watches too fancy and decorative, whereas customers wanted simple, accurate, durable, and elegant watches. To change this situation, at just 24 years old, he decided to start his own watchmaking business. But there was a problem. Hans did not have sufficient capital to start the business. Therefore, he made his brother-in-law his business partner in exchange for capital. And thus, in 1905, the firm Wilsdorf and Davis was established. First, he observed that travelers had a great need to carry a watch so they could catch trains or buses on time and reach their destinations punctually. So, he decided to make pocket watches specifically for travelers. He kept the size of this watch smaller compared to normal watches, so travelers could carry it easily. Additionally, its pouch was made of high-quality leather so that it looked premium and wouldn't break during travel. He named this watch the Portfolio Pocket Watch. Even though Hans started the company by making a pocket watch, he didn't want to make pocket watches forever. His prediction was that in the future, wristwatches would completely replace pocket watches. Therefore, Hans now put all his focus into making world-class wristwatches. But the problem was that customers at that time were not ready to accept wristwatches. Their perception was that wristwatches were only worn by females, but Hans wanted to change this customer perception. In 1906, Hans saw that in Britain both males and females loved wearing bracelets, and here he spotted a very big opportunity. He launched silver and gold wristwatches in the market whose straps were not leather but gold and silver, looking exactly like bracelets. Additionally, he did not call these watches wristwatches, but branded them as bracelet watches. Because of this strategy, his watches became popular throughout Britain. During this time, Hans noticed that all watches in the market had the manufacturer's name written on them, but now Hans wanted his watches to have their own name. A name so short that it fits neatly on the watch face and could be easily pronounced in any language. He combined different alphabets and created more than 100 names. And that's how a pleasant-sounding name came to his mind. That name was Rolex. In 1908, he got it trademarked. The sales of Rolex watches were quite good, but the problem of their accuracy was still not fully solved. Actually, the movements of wristwatches were very small. For this reason, no one had succeeded in making a perfectly accurate movement. Until 1910, Hans imported the movements for his watches from Switzerland. But now Hans determined to make his own movement. He immersed himself in the study of horology. He held meetings with expert watchmakers from around the world, and he made himself an expert in movements. Then he developed his first wristwatch movement, the 15-line caliber 200. He sent it to the official chronometer testing institute in Switzerland. It underwent rigorous tests there, after which it became the first wristwatch movement in the entire world to receive a chronometer certificate. Basically, Hans had created the world's most accurate wristwatch movement. Due to this innovation, Rolex's reputation grew significantly. Now their watches were exported not only to Britain but also to other European countries. By 1914, Hans had set up multiple offices for Wilsdorf and Davis in Britain. He had also prepared a team of over 60 exceptional people, and the business was growing continuously. But then a major event put a brake on their growth story: World War I. To fund the war expenses, the British government imposed a 33% export duty on watches. Because of this, overnight Rolex's prices increased by 33% compared to foreign competitors, and their sales crashed. To survive this crisis, Hans had to shift his entire company from Britain to Switzerland. Until then, Rolex was only the name of their watch brand, but after coming to Switzerland, they changed the company name to Rolex Watch Co. Limited and restarted several business operations from zero. The market for luxury watches had crashed due to the war. But then Hans observed a very interesting trend. Suddenly, there was a high demand for wristwatches from the armies fighting in World War I. Actually, during the war, it was essential for all soldiers to see the time so they could properly coordinate their actions, such as when to fire and when to advance. In such a situation, using pocket watches to see the time was not practical, because soldiers had to put their rifles down, open their coats, and then take out the watch just to see the time. That's why armies began shifting to wristwatches, where seeing the time was much easier. Seeing this, Rolex launched its trench watches for soldiers. The glass of these watches was unbreakable and the body was quite strong. They had luminescent radium hour hands so that soldiers could see the time even in low light. These trench watches helped Rolex do good business even during the war. People in their countries considered World War I soldiers to be heroes. And when people saw their heroes wearing wristwatches, they also rapidly began shifting to wristwatches. As Hans had predicted, wristwatches completely replaced pocket watches. But there was still a very big problem with wristwatches. Their accuracy would fail if dust or water got inside them. Hans now wanted to solve this problem. He determined to make a watch case that would be extremely tight, so tight that its movement could never be damaged by dust, heat, and most importantly, water. Hans observed that until then, all watches were made with a snap-on mechanism. This means watch components were simply assembled by fitting them on top of each other, much like how a lunchbox is assembled. But because of this, tiny gaps remained in the watch through which dust and water could enter. Therefore, for the first time, Rolex designed a watch case with a screw-on mechanism. It had grooves in the watch components, so they were tightly screwed together instead of just fitting together. Additionally, there were rubber rings at every important point to fill any remaining gaps. Finally, the winding crown of this watch tightly sealed the entire body together like a submarine hatch. Just like an oyster, this watch could stay underwater for an unlimited time without any internal damage. And that's why it was named the Oyster, the Rolex Oyster. This watch, launched in 1926, was revolutionary, and thus it needed revolutionary marketing to promote it. Hans found out about a swimmer named Mercedes Gleitze. She claimed to be the first woman to cross the English Channel by swimming, but many people called her claim false. So she declared a new swim to prove herself. She would cross the English Channel again, and this time in front of the world's media. Hans contacted Mercedes and offered her to be the first Rolex brand ambassador. To promote the waterproof capabilities of the Rolex Oyster, Mercedes was to keep the watch attached to her necklace during her swim. Her attempt started very well, and after swimming for about 10 hours, she covered nearly 80% of the distance of the English Channel. But unfortunately, she became exhausted after that. Therefore, she was rescued right then. Her swim was not successful, but when the Rolex Oyster was checked, it was in perfectly working condition. Even after the unsuccessful attempt, Mercedes Gleitze became popular everywhere due to her efforts, and along with her, the world's first waterproof watch, the Rolex Oyster, became popular. Hans showed Mercedes and Rolex together in his ads as well. Besides that, Hans displayed the Oyster inside a fish tank at all Rolex retailers, which even contained real fish. In 1928, he hired top British actress Miss Evelyn Leigh as a brand ambassador. In her ads, Evelyn also wore the Rolex Oyster. Due to such unique marketing strategies, the waterproofing features of the Rolex Oyster became very popular, taking Rolex's success to the next level. But while the whole world was praising Hans and Rolex, Hans himself was still not satisfied. Actually, at that time, watches were completely mechanical, meaning they didn't get power from a battery but from a mainspring. Basically, one had to turn the watch crown to tighten this mainspring. Once fully tightened, this spring would slowly unwind and move the watch hands. Simply speaking, it worked exactly like a wind-up toy. These watches had to be wound every 2 days. And in the case of the Oyster, if the crown was not tightened properly after winding, water could get inside. Therefore, Hans's next goal was to create a fully automatic watch. Hans spent years trying to solve this problem and finally invented the perpetual rotor. This was basically a semicircular rotor that could rotate a full 360 degrees inside the watch. This rotor was connected to the mainspring through multiple gears. In daily life, when the wearer moved their hand or wrist, this rotor would spin. Then this energy was transferred through gears, and ultimately the mainspring would get tightened, meaning the mainspring would get wound just by wearing the watch. This watch could run automatically forever or perpetually, and that's why it was named the Rolex Oyster Perpetual. There had been many attempts to make such automatic watches before, but Rolex was the first to make it so successfully. The Perpetual made Rolex and Hans Wilsdorf legends in the watchmaking world. But then in 1939 a huge trouble arrived, World War II. Due to the war, the global supply chain was disrupted, and Rolex's sales crashed again. After all the difficulties in the following years, Hans ensured Rolex's survival. But then another tragedy occurred. In 1944, his wife passed away. The past 6 years were the most challenging time of Hans's life. But having faced such challenges since childhood, he had developed a fighter mindset. Therefore, he regrouped his energy, and he went back to the work in which he was the world's best, making world-class watches. In 1945, Rolex completed its 40th anniversary, and on this occasion, they launched the Rolex Datast, which was the world's first automatic waterproof watch that also displayed the date. But there was a problem. Some people complained that the date display was so small it was difficult to see. As always, Hans set out to find a solution. It is said that one day a drop of water fell on his watch, making the date appear magnified to him. Taking inspiration from this, he added a 2.5x magnifying glass over the Datast watches, and this problem was also solved. By 1960, Rolex launched several more revolutionary watches, such as in 1953 when they launched the Rolex Explorer, which was basically a strong and unbreakable watch made for mountaineers and explorers, so they wouldn't have to worry about the watch getting damaged. In 1955, Rolex launched the GMT Master, which had a rotating bezel. This watch was mainly for pilots because they need to track different time zones while flying. And through this bezel, they could do that. Finally, in 1960, an experimental watch called the Rolex Deep Sea Special was launched, designed to withstand the extreme water pressure of the deep sea. In 1960, to test it, it was taken to the deepest known ocean point of that time, about 11,000 meters deep, and even at that depth, it was working perfectly. With this, Rolex established itself as the king of watches. Whether the heights of Mount Everest or the deepest point of the sea, only one watch brand had the capability to deal with every extreme condition in the world, and that was Rolex. Hans had achieved everything with Rolex that